Now, please join me in welcoming John Welsh of Accenture, who will present the award for Game Changer.
Thank you, John. Hey, before I start, what I'd like to do is ask you all to join me in thanking Karen Tucker and really the Churchill Club for putting on these game-changing programs and bringing together amazing industry leaders. So thank you, Karen. As everyone in this room knows, not all companies are created equal. Some literally change the world in such significant ways that we can no longer conceive of how we managed before their arrival. This year's Game Changer lives up to their mission statement, to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they may want to buy online. But I think we all know they're more than that. For any of you that have read the annual report of this company, you'll know that they're the epitome of a day one organization. Their shareholder letters are required reading for every company in business. This company has literally transformed every industry they've entered, from retail to publishing to entertainment to cloud computing to consumer devices and most recently grocery or soon-to-be grocery. They are really the quintessential disruptor. And they continue to set the bar, keeping every one of us in every industry on our toes. The company so deserving of the 2017 Game Changer Churchill Award is, of course, Amazon. You have forever changed the way our world works and lives, and indeed, there's no going back. At Accenture, we're very proud to be your partner, and may you never enter professional services. So with that, please welcome 17-year veteran Tom Taylor, Senior Vice President, Amazon Alexa, to accept on behalf of Amazon. And joining him on stage will be John Seely Brown, well-known technology pioneer, legend, Chief of Confusion. He can explain that when he's up here. An Amazon board member. They'll be having a conversation here on stage. Congratulations, guys. Come on up.
Congratulations, John.
Here it is.
All right. It's like high school.
I don't think you're supposed to wear it.
It doesn't fit in your pocket either.
Yeah. Go again.
Sorry, I'm an engineer. I need to take the pen out of my pocket. I just realized. Uh, 17 years. So talking to different people tonight about how Amazon's different, a little peculiar, and I'll say something, and they're like, that's really unique. And I'll be like, it is? I've been doing it that way for 17 years. So I have to try and come up with the stories that really do show how different Amazon is.
Well, the catch is to come up with kind of textured stories, because you can hear the euphemism so easily, and many of the things that I ask you could be answered by euphemistic answers, but the real catch is kind of like, give me kind of a gut sense of what it's really like in this game. So, Jeff is famous for his principles of operation that everybody here has probably read. I want to go through a couple of them with you and get kind of a feeling for how they've kind of actually impacted you and the amazing things you've done. Now with Alexa, but of course before that, FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, which is a hell of a big game changer, but never gets much attention in my book. So one of the kind of key things that we constantly talk about on the board and also with you is not only how do you invent, but how do you invent and simplify? It's not just invent, it's invent and simplify. And we don't often connect those two terms together, and yet that's what I hear all the time. How do they play out in your world?
Well, I think it is a sense of invention. It is a company that very much feels that we're builders and inventors. And I think those two words go together so well, the invention and the simplification. A lot of times the best ideas have to be the least complicated.
Right.
We use a process, as many of you know, called a working backwards document. And it's sort of our, I'm not sure whether it isn't because we aren't started as a book company, but we write everything down. And when we think about a customer idea, we start off with sort of what would the headline be? What would the customer say? Sometimes we might use like, this is what we would hope a customer might write in a blog. And it's very easy to turn that into something long and flowery and full of adjectives and never actually captures what is the very essence of what that thing you want is. And so the simplification often, just from the very beginning, is, can I really capture what would that person say that would be so different? Our Kindle in the early days is an example. The sentence finally became any book, anywhere, in any language in 60 seconds. And it was a very simple statement. It took a long time to get to that, but then that became the root of, and by the way, we didn't have the Kindle at the time. We were trying to invent what would book reading, how could you make book reading better? How could you make books better? Which is very hard because books have been, we've been working at it for several hundred years. And, but this thing said, well, it's, if I could get the next book really quickly and such, and at the time we sort of knew that PDAs were evolving and wireless technology was evolving and data streaming. And so you sort of took the technology, but this idea of like, how could you make reading a book better, and that simplification of what it was, then you finally put it together, led to the Kindle. To sort of tie another one of this, many people imagine, when I got my MBA, they put a little chart up that said, you should focus on your strengths and your weaknesses and your competitors and all this stuff. And nowhere in the discussion about a Kindle did those words appear. Right. And so you imagine you're the book leader who's used to negotiating with vendors and such, and suddenly this is the vision of books, and you're like, well, the way to do that is we'll have to get somebody who's good at hardware. We should probably, we don't do that. And Jeff's like, no, you've defined what we must do. We must deliver these books, and no one else is doing it. And so what we need to do, not what we can do, what we need to do is go get very good at building hardwares and e-readers and the screens and all these sorts of things. And so that was that invention, the simplification, is just these powerful moments that lead you on to that.
Right. And as I recall, as I see, there's often a lot of argumentation about, can you get it simpler?
Yes.
I mean, so it's easy for us in Silicon Valley to think, well, I'm going to build this wow thing. No. Now let's start why. And once I tell you why, let's figure out, can we actually get to the kernel of that and try to get that as simplified as possible so everyone inside our organization can get it. And that pushback to constantly push for the simple, I find, quite interesting. Yep. Let's go back to the book company.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was most surprised at being on the board, and it turns out to be more universal throughout multiple layers in Amazon, is at the board level, we have a book reading club. We would allocate an hour, a book would be chosen, and we would sit around, we would read that book before we get there.
Yeah.
You do a lot of prep work if you're going to face to Jeff himself. And you read that, and we really kind of discuss that book completely openly. And yet, I was kind of curious to kind of suddenly learn that same book then is given to the senior team, and they have a book club.
Yeah.
And tell me more about the kind of the culture of how that book club permeates the culture.
It is true. So Jeff and his staff, we've read books around. In one of the books that I recommended very early in my operations team was a book about lean manufacturing and the goal. And of course, many people have read it, but not many people in, say, computer science had read such a book.
Right.
But the focus on bottlenecks and stuff, and it was very interesting for us, led to also emerging at that time was a bit about agile software development. And so here's a book around one particular topic, but the entire staff read that, had a very deep discussion about it. But we've had those discussions around organizational design. One of the things that Amazon does is we believe that while it's a very large company, it should be organized like a startup. And so every team we call it a 2-pizza team, should be a group of people that would eat about 2 pizzas in the evening. Pick your size, but let's just say 10 people. And so that 10 people should do whatever they need to do to solve their particular task. But that idea came out of reading a book around organic growth and biology. And the mitosis, and when the group starts to get a little big, you need to split it in half, and it needs to turn into 2 groups of 10. We recently read as esteemed the book of the Master Algorithm, which was written by a professor at University of Washington, and I'll tell you, it took me more than an hour to read that book. And now
took me more.
Now that I've moved into Alexa, I've had to read it again. But imagine, the most senior executives reading books about the very variety of ways computer algorithms and machine learnings are going, and then actually having a conversation that was a little bit of, some of this stuff's outdated. This book's almost 2 years old. And I think that's very interesting that the leadership team of a large company is capable of being sort of needing to be on the forefront of when these things are going on.
And you see that in so many different dimensions in Jeff himself.
Yeah.
So, another kind of one of the key principles is, how do you read it off here? Learn and, critical, be curious. It's not just learn, but is that the role of being curious. Now, that's such an easy thing to say. But how does that actually get manifested in the culture of Amazon?
Well, I think you sort of have to hire people that are curious. It's actually one of the things that's very easy to inspect for during an interview process. And have you ever thought about a different way to drive to work? You have a natural curiosity around solving problems. And it's a good mindset. As an interesting example, we were trying, as a company gets bigger, you try to figure out, well, how do I really stay in touch with what's going on in the company? And this started in our fulfillment centers where, how do I know that I have good morale? This is a classic thing. Well, you do a morale survey every year. But Amazon's like, that doesn't scale. It's not real time. By the time you find out a problem, it's, the problem happened a year ago. And so we put in a single question that a person, as an employee comes in, and it happens for all of us now. The computer turns on. It has one question. Did your boss make you laugh today? Or, how many times did your boss make you laugh? And one of the things it does, it makes you curious, like, well, I don't know, am I supposed to? Sort of reinforce. But anyway, one of the questions was, how do you stay in touch with your customer? And the answers were, I don't. I talk to the sales team. I look at my weekly business deck. I listen to we use the phrase anecdote, the customer who writes an email and says, hey, Alexa did this weird thing today. And again, this is machine learning scientists behind it come back with the data. And this particular question was very interesting because we had just rolled it out to the vice president's company, which is kind of a small group of, not as many as you might think. And I'm like, well, you're never going to get statistical significance on 100, 200 people. And it came back and says, it turns out if you looked at people who had been here a long time, they had a different answer than the people who are new to the company. And this is interesting because then you realize, many times, even senior people coming into the company have learned a different approach. And the answer here was, if you were newer to the company, your answer was, I look at the weekly business review. I look at the averages, I have customer satisfaction stats and all these things. And if you're long time to the company, your answer was, I listened to the anecdote. I took the email that customer wrote me, or wrote Jeff, and Jeff sent it on, and I went, well, that's weird. And I contacted someone else, or I called customer service, or I really dug down, and this is also part of our dive deep culture and things. But as a fantastic example of this was, we were always getting emails that said, my package didn't show up on time. By the way, that was the whole reason we started FBA. But anyway, customers said, my package didn't come up on time. And yet, I'm from operations, and I'm like, I have the data, 99.999% of the time, it shows up. So this customer is just a loser. Who knows why they wrote you? And but Jeff would say, you're not being curious. For some reason, you're seeing this. And so you had to follow that thread deep down. And in this particular example, what happened, what we learned was, these anecdotes showed up was, it shows up on time unless you live in an apartment, unless you're behind a gated community or something like that. And those people were having the problem. And again, if you look at averages, and this is in Jeff's shareholder letter, if you have this data and this proxy for a customer, which is I look at weekly averages and it's 99.9, I ignore it. You have to have your curiosity and follow that down. And that led us to say, well, great, now we have to invent around gated communities, which we've done. We started to put in, how do we solve that problem? So,
yeah, it's a great example. It shows you that even with deep learning data analytics, you got to know how to ask the questions. You got to interrogate the context constantly to get to the core of what the real issue is. But I'm really struck when you talk about the anecdotes, because I'm constantly surprised that Jeff does seem to process a lot of these stories that come into him. I'm sure he has some filtering mechanisms for all that. But once a week, I get an email.
I believe he reads them all. I don't know how he does it.
Somebody's doing a good job, but he does pass these stories on.
Yeah.
He said, this is a really interesting story. We got to talk about it. And I've been on various boards in all kinds of situations. I've never gotten such a thing.
But by the way, another fun story. So 2 weeks ago, a customer wrote Jeff saying, hey, Jeff, I'm sure you know this, but it was last Thursday was the 50th, probably most of you know this, 50th anniversary of the first Star Trek episode. Right? How many people knew? And so this
Jeff did.
Yeah, Jeff did. And the customer said it'd be really cool if you could make Alexa use computer instead of Alexa, and which she did, but he didn't know. But he says, and if you could, do other things around Star Trek. And so Jeff took that, and the team jumped on it. And so last Thursday, when you said Alexa, good morning, she went, ah. Really, really a beautiful, just that classic Alexa voice trying to sing. There's
you have a second career.
Yeah, sorry. I was a tenor. Anyway, a lot of Easter eggs out there for the Star Trek fans. Try revenge is a dish best served cold. Try this time. What she says.
Yeah. So another key property I constantly sense and see sometimes is this principle of the absence of any passive-aggressive behavior. I mean, that is, you can, if you want to disagree, and be articulate about it, be open about it. Well, when push comes to shove, let's commit.
Yep.
And then you really seriously commit. Now, I've never been in meetings where the conversation leaving the meeting is the same as the conversation in the meeting.
That's a sign of a good meeting.
It's also kind of a sign of a very good culture that actually enables or discourages any kind of passive-aggressive behavior like that. And it was really kind of hit me. But it leads into kind of a really big question that I'm fascinated by, being here in the middle of Silicon Valley. Maintaining a day one culture, maintaining the spirit of what defined most of our startups. And as they become more and more successful, right around here, the culture of those corporations get completely transformed. It's a mystery to many of us in even organizational theory, as well as even sitting on the board for many, many years. How does that happen? I mean, it is not just a wonky line. I mean, it appears to be kind of true.
In terms of how we've maintained that culture,
right?
Even
Right.
It is a fascinating topic, and maybe it's a little hard to answer from the inside. But I think there's a number of reasons we've been successful. I think certainly Jeff remaining as CEO and founder is an important one, and a very long-standing leadership team that has been in place for a long time.
Right.
But it's hiring to those leadership principles, and you mentioned, we can all put them up on the wall, but people come into the company, and some of the other employees of Amazon are here, and they're saying, I get it that you asked me about them in the interview question. I was surprised it was in the first meeting. I'm surprised it's in the promotion document. I'm surprised it's in how we made a decision that we were debating, and somebody says, well, let's look to the leadership principles to help us come to that decision. And so they're very much part of us. I think we also realized, I think we always believed that this was going to be very big. And part of growth of whether it's number of employees or numbers of cities or number of products that we're in has always been part of our culture. And if you have that mindset, you also have a good operations culture which says, well, then I need to be ready for that. So we talk about mechanisms.
Right.
And to bring it back to also you were hinting to one of our leadership principles about, we call it disagree and commit.
Right.
And many people think that means I'm supposed to commit to not argue with you. Which is, no, it's in fact, how do you make mechanisms to require people to disagree? And so while we write that press release, we want to take the strongest advocate for the idea, or perhaps the most knowledgeable, to also write, well, what would the negative press release be?
Right.
And enforce it's a mechanism to force people to debate. We don't like to come into meetings with one recommendation that everybody is sort of social cohesion, through 10 levels of meetings has gotten to that. We always want to have meetings that have multiple options so we can sort of debate and then say, well, how did we choose that, and can we write those tenets down? And so I think the choice of the people that we hire, the reinforcement to the leadership principles in a variety of ways, I think these mechanisms that we have, back even to these small pizza teams or single-threaded teams that, that team needs to act independently like a startup, go fast, speed matters. We have, again, if you read Jeff's letter, talks about one-way doors and two-way doors and escalator. All these elements are there constantly, and then we reinforce them through these mechanisms, and it's fantastic. I can go to any office anywhere in the world, and even though countries may have slightly different cultural norms, I know when I walk in, this is an Amazon office by people talking about the leadership people, how people are making decisions, how fast people are moving. I know it's an Amazon location.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic thing to have achieved. I mean, it's so easy again to think everybody is that way, but you never see it. So that's so. What has surprised you the most during your times at Amazon?
Oh gosh, I am delighted the fact that I've had a chance to I've had a chance to build a business from there's 5 people in an office with a whiteboard and turn that into a multi-billion-dollar business, and to see that in so many groups, to feel that. I worked at a little automotive company called General Motors, and we certainly never had that feeling. So I think the sense of empowerment, the fact young or old, regardless of experience, it's just been fascinating. And for me now, recently moving into Alexa, a very new space, sort of conversational artificial intelligence, very forefront technology, and how people are embracing it. Maybe that's one of the newest things that is surprising me. I think it's interesting, but the fact that people are interacting with voice in very different ways and very powerfully has just been fascinating fun for me.
And going back to kind of the notion of keeping it simple is the ability to have, far-field voice recognition, so you don't always have to hold it up like this.
Yeah.
That simple idea, which is technically mammothly complicated, as you know, and I know, completely transforms a whole new form of interface.
Yeah.
And it's kind of I was really kind of struck when I saw the notion to keep it simple, how pushing for that has forced us to kind of really think radically new thoughts about how to do this game that will transform ubiquitous computing in all kinds of other ways.
Right. This is well said.
So, okay. So I think we're out of time. This is, I got to say that, to me, one of my first board meetings, we go around the room and Jeff says, first of all, there are no PowerPoint slides, anything like that. Everything was done in a board meeting by writing, we're given a 5-page written document with questions to the end. And those questions then start discussion. Yep. No presentation about the paper itself. You were supposed to have read that and so on and so forth. But what became clear is one of the reasons that how Jeff was using us, I think he uses you guys in the senior team as well, is what he says the organizational no. Mm-hmm. It is, what things have we overlooked? What things had been said, well, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work. Or that company did that and didn't work. And that willingness is to challenge extant wisdom in a world of constant change seems to be a fantastic heuristic to be able to kind of push forward and then still find the absolute simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay.